We want to talk about the different types of content that you would have in your shots. So this is a little bit different from just talking about camera angles. We've talked throughout the semester about how different camera angles can help your narrative because they can have different feelings to them. So now I want to keep thinking about that, but I also want to think about the content. And I'm going to break the content of your shots down into three categories. And these are the three that I'm going to be looking for in your upcoming project and also in your final: informational, symbolic, and detailed shots. Now, I'll start with informational. Almost everything is an informational shot. Let's have a little bit of a video going, playing in the background here. Informational shots are the shots that we need to have to be able to tell us everything about the narrative, right? So it could be everything from the actions of the person to showing us where they're located, um, everything that basically takes us from A to B in the narrative. So everything that we need to be able to understand something about the place and about the person, the kind of information. So this is like the default shot, the information shots. It gives us the story, the information that we need for the story. So what I'm going to do with this PowerPoint, by the way, is I have several links throughout the PowerPoint, and I've asked you some questions like, look at this TV intro, 6 Feet Under, and I want you to answer, because this would normally be a class discussion, but I want you to answer on discussion board, look at this short intro and tell me, what are the informational shots? You don't have to list every single one of them, but like 5 informational shots. But what are the shots that tell us what this show is going to be about? So, by the way, the examples that I'm posting here are TV intros. And the reason I'm doing a TV intro is because they're really short and they give you a lot of good information in them because they have to try to get some kind of narrative across. They have to try to tell you something, but they typically don't have a lot of dialogue. Therefore, they don't have a lot of acting. And that's what we're talking about in our narratives. So the TV intro is from 6 Feet Under. And I want you to first look at it and just kind of brief me, make notes of like what are the informational shots. We don't really care right now about what's going on with the audio. One really important informational shot that I want you to use a lot, or not a lot, but in your narratives, so it generally happens at the beginning and it may happen at a transitional point, is called the establishing shot. I also have a link on Blackboard with to a whole bunch of great shots that everyone needs to know, 30 shots. An establishing shot is one of them. So an establishing shot is generally our first shot, and it serves the purpose to tell us the location. Now, in a TV sitcom, for example, you might have like the outside of a house or the outside of an apartment building. Like every Seinfeld always started with like an outside of an apartment building, and then we see the people inside. And the jump that we're supposed to make is that we're inside that building. So, in other words, the establishing shot is supposed to be true, but in reality, when you shoot it, it doesn't have to be true. So, for example, here is an establishing shot that we see in a narrative about a person who's supposed to be homeless. So it doesn't generally have a person in it or have any kind of dialogue or anything like that. It just doesn't even have to evoke a lot of emotion. It just kind of sets us up. So instead of throwing us right into the action, it gives us like a moment to sort of breathe and say, okay, we're going to get into movie watching mode, so to speak. So I definitely want you to have that at the beginning of your narrative, an establishing shot. An establishing shot can also be really useful if you are changing scenes. So go back to think about the Better Call Saul and remember when we're inside the mall and then before they show him inside his house, we have that establishing shot that works very well as a transition shot where we're outside, we see that it's night, we see that it's snowing, and we see like some apartment buildings in the background or some kind of building. So that helps establish that we've left, it's nighttime, and now we're going somewhere else. Symbolic shots. Now you knew these were coming, right? We've been talking about symbols all the time. So even in a good narrative, I want you to think about having symbolic shots. These shots are the kind of shots that they don't have to be there for us to understand the story, but they add something. They could be like a harbinger or they set a mood. They also can work really well as a transition in between scenes. And think back to what we talked about in the beginning of the semester, all of the different universal objects that could be really good symbolic shots, like a cloud storm or looking at a tree or water in all different types of form. So I want you to get at least one symbolic shot into your narratives. So the symbolic shot the way we did it at the beginning of the semester, they didn't really have to make a lot of sense. But when you use these symbolic shots now, they should make sense. So they can't be totally random. So I want you to watch, so go back to 6 Feet Under, that TV intro that we were talking about. And there are definitely a few symbolic shots there. So shots that aren't about the narrative themselves, but they are related and they kind of help set the mood. All right, so just think back to like this list of the ones that I put there and make a note of those. Then I want you to watch. So normally in the classroom, we would watch about a half hour or so from Barton Fink and analyze it. I could not find a full copy of it for free online. I'll show you what I did find and what's on the link here. Is this version here, which is the full movie, but it has stars around it and it's shrunk down. So sorry about that, but the quality is still good. I want you to watch the first 7 minutes of this and kind of make note of what the camera's doing. I think the camera's doing some really interesting movements in here. First 7 minutes, and right before the end of that 7 minutes, there's going to be a really strong symbolic shot. And I want you to try to make note about like how the audio works in that and like what is that symbolic shot doing. It's not totally random, but it serves kind of a purpose. It helps give us a little bit of information. All right, so make notes of all of that, and you're going to put that into your discussion board post. So we've talked about information shots, symbolic shots. The third type of shot is the detailed shot. So the detailed shot is almost always a close-up. The detail shots are so important because it's a way that you could give us some information about the person, about their character, their personality, about something that they're thinking about even, without having to get into dialogue and explain it. So they're almost always these close-up shots. It's some kind of little detail that in a way explains a backstory. So I give you some examples here. So let's say, how do you say that someone is part of a large family? Maybe this is like big part of the narrative is like they're now living alone and that they once were part of a family. So how could you show, first of all, that someone's living alone? You could answer me some different ways on discussion board here, but you could show like a dinner table and it just has a place setting for one person, for example. That shows that someone's living alone. How do you show, though, that this person is maybe part of a bigger family? Well, you could have a close up shot of a whole bunch of photographs on a table, and that gives us context, that gives us backstory. Okay? So here's just another kind of random example. How could you show that someone's part of the Air Force, or it could be Army or Navy or Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever? Maybe that's something part of who they are. So we're almost thinking about character development here. Well, you could have a close up of like a pin on their jacket that says something. Or, think about like tattoos. Maybe you want to be able to say something about a person, something that they love, or something about their background, but without having to add that into like character, into dialogue and into the whole story. You could show a close up of someone's tattoo, and maybe that says something about them. How could you show that someone is impoverished or maybe like that someone is homeless? You could have some close ups of their clothing that's tattered or torn, or maybe like their hands or their fingernails that looks like they haven't been washed. How could you show that someone had a fight with someone? So maybe we see someone sitting alone and they're just looking out the window and the room is very dark. And then you show us a close up of like an invitation and it's ripped up. And that gives us a whole backstory that explains to us without dialogue and without acting why that person is sitting there by themselves. Or it doesn't fully explain, but it allows us to kind of jump. How can you show someone has a drinking problem? I'm just giving kind of like, I don't know, just random examples here, but also I'm kind of pulling from narratives that past students have used in the past. So that's an easy one, just a pile of empty bottles. It could be on a table, it could be in a recycling bin, something like that. How could you show that someone's being unfaithful? Well, you could have a close-up shot, and these are detailed shots, but they can have action as well. It could be a close-up shot of that person taking their wedding ring off and throwing it on the desk, or it could be a close-up shot of just like that wedding ring left in a car or something like that. Okay, so these detailed shots are really important. It helps give us more information about that person. Just think of it as like character development. So I want you to go back to 6 Feet Under and see if there are any detailed shots. And I'd say there's really only one shot that I'd put in this category of detailed shot, something that tells us a little bit of a bigger picture, a little bit of a story of something beyond just what we see there at the moment. And then I'd like you to look through this TV intro, another one from Boardwalk Empire. I think I have that also here. It's a great show if you guys haven't seen it. And these are also, they're all only a minute and a half long. And I want you to keep track of what information, what do we learn about this person, about this character from all of the detailed shots. So this one has a ton of detailed shots and a ton of symbolic shots. So I also want you to keep track of the symbolic shots. So what you're seeing here, it's just symbolic and detailed shots, but we do learn a decent amount, or you can figure out or make some good educated guesses about this person from all of these detailed close-up shots. So write those down. You don't have to write every single one, but basically, what do we learn about them and through which shots? Then I want you to go back to what I was showing at the very beginning of this past student example of a narrative. And I want you to find she has one symbolic shot in here and one detailed shot. So a shot that is close up, that's telling us something about the person's background, something that we're not getting from just watching them and what's at the present moment. Keep track of. So that's the bottom link here. All right, and then if you just want it as a summary on my last slide here, these are all of the questions that I want you to answer and put on discussion board. On top of what I also want you to do for your homework for this, just because we need to really kind of replace the class discussion here, and I want to make sure that you're getting this, is I'd like you to go and to look on YouTube or Vimeo or other TV intros. Maybe you already know some, see if they're out there that have symbolic and or detailed shots. So they're all going to have informational shots, right? So I wrote you have to have two of the three. So probably informational and maybe a symbolic, or informational and a detailed shot. So just find one TV intro of your own and post that as well, along with your answers here on discussion board. And then tell us in there, like, okay, the detailed shot is close up of a cut on his hand, or the symbolic shot is, the moon behind a cloud or something like that. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.